What is founder mode? And maybe you could call it Watson mode. I've been a startup founder for the last 20 years, and anybody who's worked around me knows that I am always in this founder mode that Paul Graham posted about a couple weeks ago. He penned a great article about how a lot of big companies probably need founder mode. They get stuck in manager mode, and there's guys like me that are always in founder mode that don't work very well in these big companies. And today I want to give you my take on founder mode because I've been in this mode for 20 years and I've had some really unique experiences that I think other founders could relate to as somebody who kind of struggles with this. So there are a lot of strengths to it, but there are also weaknesses. And I actually want to talk about some of the weaknesses and the problems that I have specifically had that I would say are a little bit of warning to other founders out there. So I think first and foremost, as a founder, if you're going from kind of zero to the first million in revenue during that time frame is by far the hardest of any company. It's a brutal experience. And that is probably where founder mode is the most important. You need to be hands-on, willing to make quick decisions, taking risk in the details of every little thing, because you have to have extreme ownership of this thing because you have bet the farm. You cashed out your 401k, you quit your job, you did all these things. You are taking all the risk to make this thing work, right? And you've got to be kind of in that founder mode, really engaged, trying to figure it all out. Now, even in early stages, that could have its problems. And one of the problems there is like, well, if you have a co-founder, you have to also be able to delegate to them and trust in them to do their job. Okay. And if you hire people, you have to be able to delegate to them and trust and do their job. And so this is something that I have struggled a lot with. And I have a couple stories that I want to tell you specifically about this. So my first story comes from my days at Stackify. I had a great chief operating officer, a gentleman named Craig Farrell, who I absolutely adore and would love to work with one day again. And one day he came to me and he told me, he's like, Matt, I know you don't like to read books, but you need to read this book. And I'm like, oh crap, what did I do? What does that mean? Craig wants me to read a book. Something must be wrong. Is Craig going to quit? Like, what is the deal? And it was a book called Rocket Fuel. And I highly recommend this. And it was about how you have to pair the visionary, which is usually a lot of times one of the founders, the CEO, just somebody like me, with somebody else who is more the operational mind. And then how those two people work together. He's like, Matt, you have a million ideas. You're running around the company. You're telling everybody what to do. You kind of get into the weeds. You're like moving really fast. And he's like, Matt, a lot of people don't know what to do with that. Like yesterday you had a different idea or you told them to do a different thing. Part of the issue of that and being a founder is that can really paralyze people because they don't know what to do. They kind of freeze. They're like, well, if I do this thing, if I don't do this thing, he's going to change his mind. Like, what do we do? And the cure to this is part of what it talked about in the book of having a chief operating officer, somebody else to work with. You can bounce all these ideas off and they help filter it and they can help run and manage these projects with the rest of the team. So that was my first experience where Craig kind of went to me. And I think that was the red flag of like, you know what? I'm always kind of in this founder mode. I didn't really call it that or think of it at the time, but it perfectly describes the way that I work. And my mind is like, go, 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 do, 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 do. And actually this week I had a similar conversation with Daryl at Fullscale, our chief operating officer. And he's like, Matt, you know, some of us aren't sure what to do. Like everybody's like, you're in all these lanes, you're making all these decisions. Like people are a little nervous of like, who do I ask? Do I ask Matt about this thing? Do I ask somebody else about this thing? You know, we have to kind of, again, go back to that same thing of like, well, I need to work more through Daryl. He needs to be the central point so that everybody knows like who's making the decisions. Like this is the big challenge when you have an entrepreneur, kind of like myself. Again, I've been in this mode for 20 years. I have to learn how to deal with everybody else because not everybody else can deal with the speed and the quickness of that. I want to make decisions and move. And it's always been a challenge for me, but it's something that I understand. So those of you who are kind of like me and always running in this founder mode, a lot of companies actually will struggle to scale at some point because of this. There are a lot of strengths to this sort of founder mode, but there are also a lot of weaknesses. I kind of told you a couple of my stories, but the issue is eventually companies may have difficulty with scaling because the entrepreneur, like myself, doesn't necessarily do a good job of hiring the right people, trusting and delegating to them and getting out of their way. The trick is to figure out what you're really good at, what you're passionate about, and what you bring the most valuable to the company, and try to put more energy and more focus into that thing, and then do everything you can to get out of the way, out of all the rest of the phases of the business And that's where I have tried to do a good job in the past of, working with the team, still involved with the strategy, working with the chief operating officer to figure out what we're doing, but trying to stay out of the weeds, trying to delegate, trying to let them do their things. And so if you don't do that, eventually you will run into problems with scaling because you're not delegating and building the VPs and C levels that you need to really grow to the next level. The other challenge, of course, is micromanagement. If everybody feels like you're micromanaging everybody, you're too in the weeds, again, your VPs and other employees are gonna get very frustrated with you because they feel like you're just making every decision. So again, it's delegation, but it's also not micromanaging the team. You've got to give them trust and get out of the way. The other challenge here is a lack of structured process. Like, a lot of founders like myself don't really like process. Again, we want to make decisions and we want to move quickly. But I was talking to Daryl this week about, hey, we need to roll out a new CRM or applicant tracking system. It's like, why don't we just do this thing? Let's go. And he's like, well, wait. We have a lot of employees. We have to train everybody. We have to make sure we handle every scenario, that nothing is going to drop through the cracks because we quickly released this new CRM and did this thing. And again, as a founder running in founder mode, we don't want to hear that. We're like, let's go. So you need somebody like a Daryl, you need a operations person to throttle you at times like, okay, wait a second. You have to think through all the details, and that's important. Another challenge for a lot of founders is they get resistant to taking feedback and opinions of other people. Like, they think they know what's best and they don't want to hear from others' different perspectives, which is also a real challenge and problem. I think I've always been really open-minded, and this particular one isn't a problem for me. Like, if somebody tells me my baby is ugly, I can handle it. I just want to figure out the best way. Hence, when Craig told me you need to read this book, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. If that makes this better, let's do it. But there are some people that don't do well with that. They don't do well with criticism. They don't do well with taking direction. And that is probably one of the biggest weaknesses of people that may be in this mode, is you've got to realize you're in this mode and kind of what your weaknesses are. And you need your team to be able to voice those to you and learn from them and work together as a team to figure out how to move forward, to scale, delegate, and do the things that you need to do. Ultimately, for a lot of founders, this is going to lead to burnout. If you don't hire the people you need, delegate, get out of the way, and kind of slow down just a little bit, you will burn out. And I have been through this. So one of the other things that Paul Graham talked about in his article is how a lot of big companies actually probably need founder mode. And if you think about this in recent times, we have a great example of this. You have an example of somebody like Elon Musk buying Twitter and basically throwing it into founder mode right away. And some people love or hate Elon Musk, but I think you can kind of see, again, with his founder mode, sort of with Twitter, now X, he's moving fast, breaking things, not scared to make decisions. Is he doing it all perfectly? No. Are there stories about how he crazily did this or crazily did that? Yes, but I think the point here is companies can move faster. Like, he is proving and has proved that companies, even bigger companies, can move faster. They can figure out ways to do this. I think the key is having a happy medium, right? He's moving a little too fast, being a little too brash with making decisions and not worried about, the outcome of those decisions. So ultimately, we need to find a middle ground somewhere. But for a smaller company, what I really recommend is having some kind of chief operating officer that you can work with, that you can have a lot of ideas, try and move fast, and have them help you execute those things. But then you have to figure out with what part of your business you should be in the weeds of. And it could be whatever the biggest problem is for your company, which for most companies is sales and marketing. It's growth. How do we grow this thing? If you're a little more in the weeds and that part of it, it may be okay, but you just have to figure out, do I have a VP or C levels in those departments as well that I have to support them, not run over them? You have to figure out how you work with them. And again, you're not running out crazy all the time in founder mode. So I hope you enjoyed my story of founder mode. Again, I feel like I've been in this mode for the last 20 years. It's just how I naturally am, and never heard it called founder mode, of course, until a couple weeks ago when Paul Graham mentioned it. But I think there's a lot of benefits to it. But for those of us who are kind of stuck in this mode, we have to understand the downfalls and the negatives of it as well. And I hope this was helpful. Thank you, guys.